Welcome to Terror Hawk Recap. Today, we're breaking down the intense thriller, Get Out. The movie opens with a young black man walking alone on a quiet road at night, unknowingly stepping into a trap. What starts as a simple visit to his girlfriend's family quickly turns into a nightmarish battle for survival, where nothing is as it seems, and everyone hides a deadly secret. Stay with us as we reveal the entire story, scene by scene. The movie opens with a young man named Andre walking alone at night along a quiet suburban road. The atmosphere is calm but unsettling. As he continues, a car slowly begins following him. Sensing danger, Andre changes direction, trying to avoid it. However, when he turns back, he notices the car has stopped with its door open. Before he can react, a masked man suddenly attacks him, knocks him unconscious, and drags him into the car. The story then shifts to Rose visiting her boyfriend Chris at his apartment, bringing coffee and snacks. Chris is a photographer, and the two are preparing for a weekend trip to visit Rose's family. Chris feels uneasy because her parents are unaware that she is dating a black man. Rose reassures him that her family is very open-minded and will not have any issue with their relationship. As they begin their journey, Chris lights a cigarette, but Rose quickly throws it out the window, explaining that her parents would not approve. During the drive, Chris calls his friend Rod to ask him to take care of his dog. Rod warns him that visiting a white girlfriend's family might not be a good idea, though he says it in a half-joking way. Their conversation is interrupted when a deer suddenly runs onto the road, and they hit it with their car. They step out to check the situation and call the police. When the officer arrives, he asks for Chris's ID even though he was not driving. Rose firmly questions the request and refuses, leading the officer to back off and let them go. Chris appreciates how Rose stood up for him. They soon arrive at Rose's family home, where her father Dean greets them warmly and tries to make Chris feel comfortable. Her mother Missy, a hypnotherapist, offers to help Chris quit smoking through hypnosis, but he politely declines. Inside the house, Chris notices two black workers, Walter and Georgina. Dean explains that they used to work for his parents and stayed on after they passed away. However, Chris finds their behavior unusual and slightly unsettling, leaving him with a growing sense that something is not right. Dean gives Chris a tour of the house, showing him old family photographs and sharing stories about his past. He mentions that his father was once a talented track runner who lost to Jesse Owens during the 1936 Olympics, an event that left a lasting impact on him. Dean speaks about it with a mix of pride and bitterness. Chris also notices several photos of Rose's brother, Jeremy, and learns that he is studying to become a surgeon like his father, though he has recently gone through some personal struggles. Later, the family gathers for tea. As Missy calmly stirs her cup, she gently taps the spoon against the glass, creating a subtle but noticeable sound. During the conversation, she asks Chris about his parents. Chris shares that his father left when he was young, and his mother died in a car accident when he was only 11. While serving tea, Georgina suddenly behaves strangely, appearing momentarily frozen before continuing as if nothing happened. Missy quickly tells her to go and rest. The family also reminds Rose about their annual gathering taking place the next day, something she seems to have forgotten. That evening, Rose's brother Jeremy arrives. His behavior is aggressive and unpredictable. During dinner, he drinks heavily and starts talking to Chris about fighting, suggesting that Chris has the physical ability to be a strong fighter. He even tries to provoke him into a playful fight, but Chris refuses, noticing that Jeremy is clearly intoxicated. Dean and Missy step in and send Jeremy to bed, calming the situation. Later that night, Chris and Rose go to their room. Rose apologizes for her family's behavior, and they eventually fall asleep. Around midnight, Chris wakes up and steps outside for a cigarette. While standing in the dark, he suddenly sees Walter running straight toward him at full speed. Just as it seems like he might collide with him, Walter sharply turns and runs past him without saying a word. The moment is deeply unsettling. Back inside, Chris notices Georgina standing in front of a mirror, staring intensely. At first, it seems like she's watching him, but he soon realizes she is completely focused on her own reflection. She calmly adjusts herself, and Chris decides to return to his room. However, before he can leave, Missy suddenly appears and invites him to sit and talk. She once again brings up his smoking habit and offers to help him quit. Though Chris remains skeptical, he agrees to listen. As she gently taps her teacup with a spoon, her voice becomes soothing and controlled. Slowly, she begins to guide him into a hypnotic state without him fully realizing it. Missy takes Chris back to the memory of the night his mother died. He recalls waiting for her to come home, feeling scared and helpless, but doing nothing except watching television. As he relives the memory, his body tenses, and he grips the chair tightly. Missy continues tapping the cup, telling him to sink. Suddenly, Chris feels himself falling into a dark void, separated from his own body, unable to move or speak while watching everything from a distance. The next morning, Chris wakes up in his bed, confused and unsettled. He checks his phone and sees a message from his friend Rod, jokingly showing a picture of his dog. With his phone battery low, he plugs it in to charge. Chris tells Rose that he believes her mother hypnotized him the previous night, though his memory of the experience feels unclear and distant. The Armitages' wealthy guests arrive for the annual party, many making awkward and borderline racist comments toward Chris. Feeling uncomfortable, he slips away and meets a blind art dealer named Jim Hudson, who praises Chris's photography and jokingly admits he's jealous of his eye for detail. Back at the party, Chris notices another black man around his age. He tries to talk to him but finds him stiff and unnatural, like Georgina and Walter. Something about him feels familiar. Chris checks his phone and finds it off again. After reconnecting, he calls Rod and explains what's happening. Rod's advice is vague, and Rose dismisses Chris's concerns, saying he's being overly suspicious. Rod suggests Chris take a photo of the man to identify him later. As Chris takes the photo, Georgina apologizes for unplugging his phone earlier. They share a brief, strange moment where she sheds a tear and says the Armitages treat her like family. Outside, when Chris snaps the photo with the flash on, the man abruptly changes from calm to frantic, bleeding from the nose, and yells, "Get out! Get the freak out while you still can." Rose asks her father what happened, and Dean claims it was just a seizure triggered by the camera. Chris remains uneasy, certain something is off. Later, during an auction, Jim Hudson buys a photo of Chris and the guests leave. While packing, Chris gets a call from Rod, who identifies the man in the photo as Dre, a cinema worker who disappeared 2 weeks ago. Chris then finds a wardrobe filled with photos of Rose with multiple black men, including Georgina and Walter, who look nothing like the versions he met. Chris realizes he's been misled, leaving him deeply unsettled. Chris tells Rose he wants the keys to load their luggage into the car. As they move toward the door, Jeremy suddenly appears, blocking the exit, with Missy and Dean nearby. Jeremy looks ready to attack, but his parents urge him to calm down. Chris insists on getting the keys, but Rose quietly says, "You realize I can't give you the keys." In that moment, Chris realizes that Rose is part of the scheme. Jeremy lunges at him, Dean shouts, and Missy taps her teaspoon on a glass, sending Chris once again into a dark, hypnotic state. Meanwhile, Rod keeps trying to reach Chris by phone, but it goes straight to voicemail. Alarmed, he investigates the photograph of Dre and reports his theory to the police, claiming Chris may have been kidnapped or made a sex slave. The officers laugh and dismiss him, refusing to take his claims seriously. Chris wakes up bound to a chair, facing a mounted deer head and an old television. A video plays featuring Dean's father, explaining their obsession with immortality and transferring consciousness. Chris realizes he has clawed into the chair's leather armrest in panic. The teacup and spoon reappear, and after 3 taps, he sinks back into the void. Rod tries calling again, and Rose answers. She lies, claiming Chris left days ago in a taxi or Uber. Rod warns her he went to the police, and she feigns concern. Sensing something is wrong, Rod attempts to record the call, but Rose quickly intimidates him, revealing she knows he truly wants to be with her. Frustrated, he ends the call. On the television, Jim Hudson appears and explains the horrifying truth. They plan to swap Chris's brain with another body. The other partygoers had expressed a desire to experience life as a person of color, but Jim's goal is singular: to see the world through Chris's eyes. Dean has perfected a neurosurgical procedure to make this possible, while Missy hypnotizes the donors to prepare them. Chris will continue existing in a shadowy, passenger-like state. The previous camera flash incident is revealed as a side effect of the procedure. Once again, 3 taps of the teaspoon plunge Chris into unconsciousness. Jeremy and Dean prepare Jim Hudson for the brain transplant surgery, with Dean instructing Jeremy to fetch Chris. Jeremy heads a few doors down to the basement, believing Chris is unconscious. He begins to remove the straps and set up an IV, unaware that Chris is faking it. Chris had stuffed padding from the chair into his ears to block Missy's hypnotic teacup taps. With a sudden move, Chris overpowers Jeremy, knocking him out. Dean calls for Jeremy and leaves the lab in search of him, only to be ambushed by Chris. Chris spears Dean with a mounted deer head, accidentally knocking over a candle that ignites a nearby blanket. Meanwhile, Rose is upstairs with headphones on, oblivious to the chaos, absorbed in researching pictures of her next victim. Chris hunts down Missy. She reaches for the teacup and spoon, but Chris beats her to it, smashing the cup. She attacks him with a knife, cutting his hand, but he turns the weapon on her, stabbing her to death. Chris heads for the front door, but Jeremy returns and grabs him in a stranglehold. After 2 failed attempts to open the door, Chris finally fights back, injuring Jeremy and breaking free. Outside, Chris jumps into Jeremy's vehicle, spotting the mask from the first scene on the front seat. He drives down the driveway but accidentally hits Georgina. Feeling conflicted and reminded of his mother, he helps her into the vehicle, but she awakens and chases him. During the struggle, her hairpiece falls off, revealing a scar from a previous brain transplant. They collide with a tree, killing her instantly. Rose, still oblivious with her headphones, hears the commotion. Rose then appears, armed with a gun. Chris pleads with her to stop, but she fires, missing him. Walter suddenly intervenes, tackling Chris to the ground. Rose commands, "Get him, Grandpa." Walter complies, and Chris uses his phone flash, stunning Walter momentarily. Walter then takes Rose's gun and, in a shocking turn, shoots her in the torso. Rose lies bleeding on the ground. She reaches for the gun, but Chris moves it away. As he approaches, Rose places a hand on his cheek, whispering that she loves him. Chris struggles with the thought of harming her but ultimately cannot. Holding back, a squad car arrives, and Rose cries for help, thinking the police are there to arrest Chris. It is actually Rod, who had tracked him down. Chris gets into the vehicle, and Rod surveys the aftermath, confirming that Chris was right to fear the house. Chris asks how Rod found him, and Rod reminds him that he works for the TSA and reassures him that everything is fine. Rose gives a final, grim smile as Rod drives Chris away. The film ends with Chris leaving the house, alive, as Rose lies dead on the street, and that's the full story of Get Out. If you enjoyed this detailed breakdown, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, and leave a comment with your thoughts. Thanks for watching Terror Hawk Recap. See you in the next thriller.